On October 22, 1962, President John F. Kennedy gave an address to the nation regarding the situation down in Cuba. This is what he revealed to the public in his speech.
Good evening, my fellow citizens. This government, as promised, has maintained the closest surveillance of the Soviet military buildup on the island of Cuba. Within the past week, unmistakable evidence has established the fact that a series of offensive missile sites is now in preparation on that imprisoned island. The purpose of these bases can be none other than to provide a nuclear strike capability against the Western Hemisphere.
This threat that the Soviet Union now posed with their new vantage point created national public distress in both countries due to the possibility of a global nuclear war between the two superpowers, what would have been the start of World War III.
The characteristic of these new missile sites indicate two distinct types of installations. Several of them include medium-range ballistic missiles capable of carrying a nuclear warhead for a distance of more than 1,000 nautical miles. Each of these missiles, in short, is capable of striking Washington, D.C., the Panama Canal, Cape Canaveral, Mexico City, or any other city in the southeastern part of the United States, in Central America, or in the Caribbean area. Additional sites not yet completed appear to be designed for intermediate range ballistic missiles capable of traveling more than twice as far and thus capable of striking most of the major cities in the Western Hemisphere, ranging as far north as Hudson's Bay, Canada, and as far south as Lima, Peru.
The locations of the missiles were revealed to Congress by Senator Kenneth Keating of New York, a few days after the discovery of the missiles by U-2 spy planes flying over Cuba. The USSR's excuse for setting up missiles in Cuba was that they were purely for Cuba's defense, when they were actually set up to counter the missiles that the US had stationed in Turkey, just 150 miles off the border of the Soviet Union. The Cuban government, already showing resentment towards the United States because of the Bay of Pigs invasion on April 17, 1961, was very eager to accept the missiles from the Soviet Union in fear of a US invasion. The Bay of Pigs was a failed attempt by Cuban exiles, trained by the CIA, to overthrow Fidel Castro's communist regime. The tension that built from this overthrow attempt grew into this crisis, which has in turn brought the world the closest it has ever been to a nuclear war. The diplomacy that it took to resolve this near catastrophe was more or less ludicrous as to how both sides came to a compromise in such a tense situation. ExComm, President Kennedy's advisory group on the issue, was very split on the matter, mainly how to handle such a delicate situation. Some of the members favored an airstrike and then an invasion, while others favored a naval blockade to prevent any more Soviet missiles getting moved into Cuba. The decided quarantine of Cuba resulted in a series of letter communications between Khrushchev and Kennedy. It took 14 days and 5 letters between the two leaders, 3 from Khrushchev and 2 from Kennedy, to resolve the situation. Because the two leaders realized the extreme consequences of pushing the button that would essentially end the world, neither wanted a war to result from the crisis. Khrushchev's first letter was a remark regarding the serious threat to the peace and security of the people of Cuba that the US posed. JFK, in turn, responded to Khrushchev's letter in another letter, laying the responsibility of the crisis upon the USSR. Khrushchev then sent a second letter proclaiming his desired terms of compromise. They were that Kennedy publicly announced that he would never invade Cuba, and Khrushchev would then have the missiles removed. Khrushchev's second letter was followed by another the next day amending the original compromise to be a trade. The US removes their missiles in Turkey for the Soviets to remove their missiles from Cuba. Kennedy, refusing to give up any ground, writes Khrushchev back agreeing to announce to the nation that he will not invade Cuba, going along the original compromise lines. Due to the unreliability and slowness of the communication between the White House and Kremlin, a hotline was installed directly between the two buildings in case of a near catastrophe like this occurring again. The last letter sent by Kennedy brought this crisis and the scariest 14 days in history to a close on October 28, 1962.